Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Christina Gray, the House Leader for the Official Opposition and MLA for Edmonton Millwoods. I'm joined today by Shannon Phillips, the Finance Critic for Pension and Insurance Issues, and the Leader of Alberta's NDP, Rachel Notley. We're gathered today on the traditional territory of Treaty 6, and I also want to acknowledge the Métis people who share a very deep connection with this land. We continue to hear from thousands of Albertans every day who are worried about protecting their retirement security. Overwhelmingly, they have the same message. The UCP needs to keep its hands off the CPP. The government to date has ignored these concerns, refused to back down, and instead introduced Bill 2, the so-called Alberta Pension Protection Act. I say so-called because it does nothing to protect pensions. Frankly, the government has misled Albertans about this bill. As the opposition House Leader, this offends me. Elected officials in that chamber have a duty to be truthful to the Albertans that elected them. Not only have the UCP launched into a plot to gamble away Albertans' pensions, something Premier Danielle Smith took off the table in the election campaign, but she and the government also seem hell-bent on deceiving Albertans at every turn. I'll now turn things over to Shannon for a few brief words.
Thank you, Christina. And you're right. This entire consultation has been nothing but propaganda. The UCP launched a survey that failed to ask Albertans if they even support leaving the CPP, basically the central question in all of this. They held pre-screened telephone town halls where tens of thousands of people tried to call to voice their concerns, and where the government let through, the minister clarified this yesterday, a little more than 100 people through, and then gloated about how excellent everything went. In one telephone town hall, Jim Dinning, the UCP's appointed architect of this pension plot, actually yelled at a caller who asked a very legitimate question. Mr. Dinning promised at one point in-person town halls on these matters, but then the Premier has repeatedly hedged when asked when those would occur. We're left to conclude that they will not occur. And actually twice, the St. Albert Seniors Centre was promised a town hall with a UCP MLA on pensions. 2 times it was cancelled. So many in our NDP caucus are going there tomorrow to hold our own town hall. And we have another in-person town hall in Red Deer on Friday, 3 more in Calgary, Edmonton, and Ardrossan next week, and we are just getting warmed up. Now, the government, meanwhile, is now pointing to a confusing consultation workbook they've posted online. It does ask Albertans if they're in favor of leaving the CPP, 18 pages in. And then there is the most egregious piece of all of this, which is the government using our money, Albertans' money, $7.5 million to advertise fake numbers and make-believe benefits of leaving the CPP. Now, at every turn, the government has sought to lie to Albertans about the pensions that all of us have worked so hard our entire lives to earn. Bill 2 is no different, and that's why I'm proud to be here today to turn things over to Rachel, who is going to talk about the various aspects of the legislation and how we can improve them so that at least if they are going to move forward with this damaging piece of legislation, that it accomplishes what the Premier has set out she wants it to accomplish, and hold this Premier that we know we cannot trust to her word.
Well, thank you very much, Shannon, and I couldn't agree more with the comments that both you and Christina have made. Frankly, after watching the Premier and the Finance Minister's bluster about Bill 2, I really was shocked when I sat down and reviewed the legislation myself initially, and to find that it does none of the things that this UCP government is claiming that it does. If Bill 2 passes in its current form, the UCP could hold a referendum, lose it badly, and still happily proceed on ahead with an Alberta pension plan. And it would not contravene this proposed legislation. The bill also fails to stop the provincial government from giving that all-important notice to the federal government that they want to leave the CPP before a referendum is held. Fact is, they could roll the dice on the retirement before everyday Albertans are even invited to the table. Additionally, there are no safeguards in place on what the question must say, no guardrails around the information provided to the public in the lead-up to and during the referendum. That's right. To put it more simply, the UCP could hold a pointless, non-binding referendum, one that would not actually have a material effect on whether we gamble away CPP, And the government could then continue lying to Albertans about the benefits of doing so all along the way. Albertans should know that this is a bill that does not protect their CPP, does not protect their retirement security, and does not protect their voice in this discussion. So the Alberta NDP is here to fight all of this. And while we think the entire plot to gamble away Albertans' pensions should be stopped in its tracks, we will, in our role as opposition, do everything in our power to at least improve this bill and hold Danielle Smith to her word. And it's with this in mind that we intend to introduce a number of critical amendments to Bill 2, some of which would ensure the following. First, that the UCP government cannot give formal notice to the federal government that that we intend to withdraw from the Canada Pension Plan without first holding a referendum that has a clear question. Secondly, that the results of that referendum must be binding. And third, that Albertans have access to nonpartisan factual education during the referendum period so they can be informed about the real facts while being asked to make their decision. Now, there are other amendments that we also will be introducing as well, but those ones that I just outlined are the most important. That Albertans have their voice heard. That's what we're focused on. That any referendum question is clear. And that the taxpayer-funded campaign to trick Albertans into leaving CPP ends. If this bill passes without these amendments, the UCP will have free rein to gamble our pensions with no public accountability. And we will not let that happen. Danielle Smith promised Albertans a voice in this, and then she has moved every opportunity to silence them at every turn. That is wrong. Albertans' pensions belong to Albertans, and they are their reward for a lifetime of hard work. So thank you, and all three of us are happy to take any questions that you might have.
All right, thank you, Rachel. We'll now move to questions, and we'll start within the room.
So having a binding referendum, like if it's like 2% support, obviously you'd be in favor of that binding, but isn't there a possibility you could get like 51.4%? That's a majority. It passes, then they'd have to go ahead.
Well, let's be clear. We don't support any of this. But Danielle Smith has promised Albertans that they will get a referendum. And she's out there using that promise as a means of getting them to listen to her fake information and her campaigning. And all along, she said, oh, don't worry about this. You'll always get your voice. But now she's bringing in legislation to say, actually, you're not going to get your voice. You're going to get a chance, maybe way too late, to articulate your opinion. But we are making no promises about listening. So that's the thing Albertans need to understand, is that their premier is telling them one thing, and that the legislation is delivering something very, very different. And like with so many other things in this pension debate, we've got another example of the premier lying to the people of the province.
But if, as you say, this propaganda campaign, as you call it, if it's a very good, successful campaign and convinces people, would you accept then a majority?
You know, that's a very, very hypothetical situation, Catherine, especially because up to this point they've had at least 3 separate opportunities to provide a semblance of facts and balance and objectivity, and they've failed to do it. So they've already poisoned the water, and if past actions are an indication of future actions, I highly doubt that we're ever going to get a fair referendum either.
Now go to questions on the phone. Just a reminder for those joining us on Zoom to use the raise hand function, and for those joining us on the phones to use *9 to get into the question queue. Our first question comes from Dion Wehrmuth from City News. Go ahead, Dion. Your line is open.
On a different topic entirely. I was just hoping to get a comment on the $8.8 billion investment announcement for the petrochemical plant, net zero petrochemical plant in Fort Saskatchewan today.
Well, you know, I think it's a long time coming. The conversations with respect to those investors have been underway now for at least a solid 4 years, perhaps longer. So we've long expected that this investment was coming. We know that the federal government is the primary player in terms of providing support to this investment, but also the provincial government has now stepped up to provide a smaller one. So it's good news for Albertans who are looking for economic development and who are looking for job creation. But I think it is also very important that we acknowledge how it came about and the role of all levels of government in ensuring that it does.
Do you have a follow-up?
No, I don't. Thank you.
And we'll do one more pass for questions in person.
So on the topic of nonpartisan information, where should that come from?
Well, I think probably the best way to deal with it is to have it administered through Elections Alberta in some fashion. And in terms of the substance, I think we'd have to sort of go look at that. But it used to be the case that we could rely on the public service to provide factual information. Unfortunately, we've asked the Auditor General to look into the breach of those standards. We've written to the head of the public service who's in charge of these kinds of issues, and we've received from them no response yet. And so it's very troubling because the objectivity of the public service that we've historically been able to account on in these kinds of situations has been deeply compromised by this UCP government's campaign of misinformation. So we have to find a different model.
Anything further? And we'll do one last pass for questions on the phone. And with that, today's press conference is wrapped. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.